Flames lick the stable roof. Blood-red ashes swirl like black snow over thunderous hooves. Amid the chaos, a colossal mirror liquefies, blazing like a fissured gate to hell. Fire throws horse skeleton shadows across the rafters, while wood screams. 13-year-old Clarissa, cloaked in smoke-scorched clothes, presses a trembling hand to the glass. Boiling silver parts to reveal a corridor of fire. Phoenix, the scarred stallion, bows, waiting. Wordless, she vaults onto his back and hurtles into the inferno, pierces the mirror, and vanishes, leaving behind screams and a crimson halo that sears itself into every witness, freezing time and setting destiny alight. Subscribe now so you won't miss the heart-pounding episodes coming up. Midnight over Nevada usually tastes of cool sand and distant coyote song. But tonight, the desert gulps fire. Wind that should be calm barrels across the sage flats, carrying embers the size of coins. They whirl upward, drawing frantic spirals beneath a moon clogged by smoke. Far away, the interstate hums with tractor trailers, ignorant of the catastrophe. Closer, every cactus needle glows orange, lit by the inferno-devouring desert mirage stables. Heat rolls in ragged pulses, bending the horizon, making even the stars recoil. In this warped airspace itself feels flimsy, stitched together by the shriek of horses and the crack of beams, fracturing like brittle bones. Ash drifts sideways, writing premature eulogies across the blankness of the sky. Inside the stable, the fire moves with animal intelligence, tasting stall doors before swallowing them whole. Saddles curl like fallen leaves. Bridles snap in half-second shrieks, and varnished boards bubble into black sugar. Firefighters wrestle hoses that thrash like live pythons. Yet the pressure dies whenever a beam collapses, burying nozzles under a storm of sparks. Horses kick and rear in their cells, white eyes rolling muzzles foaming with terror. Each metallic clang of hoof on iron ricochets through the corridor, a percussive reminder that living hearts are trapped behind walls already glowing cherry red. Over the radio, someone yells for backup voice, cracking as though losing faith in language night. Yet at the far end of the corridor, past a waterfall of molten nails, a 15-foot training mirror defies the apocalypse. Installed to help skittish mustangs trust their reflections, it now rises like a silent oracle glass, unblemished aluminum frame, glowing but unwarped. Flames reach for the surface only to recoil as if meeting an electric fence. In its depths, the entire stable, every tongue of fire, every thrashing shadow compresses into a single roiling image, brighter than reality, harder to dismiss. Where walls weep resinous tears, the mirror merely gleams, alive but aloof, a cathedral window for a religion no one understands. Smoke passes before it without leaving sooty fingerprints. It is neither ally nor enemy, watching with merciless clarity. Through the shifting veil of heat steps Clarissa Vance's 10-year-old ponytail, already streaked with ash. She wears jeans 3 inches too short and her father's oversized riding helmet, the chin strap wrapped twice around her wrist so it will not fall. Each step slips on a glaze of mud and foam, yet she presses forward, jaw-clenched eyes watering from more than smoke. Moments ago, she escaped her aunt's parked sedan, sprinting past barricades before any responder could catch her. Now she navigates fallen tack trunks as though walking a childhood sidewalk compelled by gravity no adult could measure. Her breath hitches, but her determination holds forged in the furnace of orphanhood. Every heartbeat tolls like iron. Grant Vance should be barking orders right now, easing stall doors open with that calm baritone phrase. Easy girl, easy. But Grant lies beneath fresh earth on the hill beyond the paddocks. Earlier today, while townspeople filed past the coffin, Clarissa traced the bruise that marred his jaw, refusing to accept makeup where living color should be. The accident was quick, faulty wiring, a startled mare, an iron shoe against bone. What lingered was the promise he made 3 years earlier, kneeling in straw to meet her gaze. When she turned 11, he would let her ride Phoenix alone at dawn. 11 is only months away. The universe has stolen its witness, leaving the vow echoing between worlds. Echo guides her steps. She stops 10 feet from the mirror, just beyond a pool of water blackened with char. The glass wavers, not because of heat shimmer, but as though stirred from within. Colors twist fire, yielding to amber, amber to gold to the pale cream of a palomino's flank. Then the image clarifies. A horse stands on the other side of the glass. Its right half pristine, its left seared into a grotesque relief of blistered hide and exposed muscle. One eye is brown, the other a scorched hollow reflecting nothing. Clarissa's knees threaten to unlock, Yet she lifts a hand, palm trembling, reaching toward the apparition that wears Phoenix's blaze. The barn's chaos hushes, awaiting a verdict. A single breath mists the inner surface of the mirror, though Clarissa feels no exhale on her side. The spectral horse inhales again, nostrils flaring, fog blooming across the glass like frost on a winter pane. Clarissa drops the helmet. It clatters twice, then settles face up, catching sparks like stars in a black bowl. The child's tears finally break free, carving streaks through soot on her cheeks. She whispers, barely audible over the roar around them, "Daddy." At the name, the horse tilts its head, almost bowing. Its mane, half aflame, drifts in an unseen breeze, embers spiraling off like fiery dandelion seeds, seeking somewhere to root. The gesture is tender, terrifying, and deep. Without warning, a ceiling beam snaps, plunging a curtain of sparks between girl and reflection. A firefighter in a silver-striped jacket lunges through the glare, wrapping thick gloves around Clarissa's shoulders. She twists, free eyes glued to the mirror, feet skidding across wet sawdust. The rescuer shouts orders, but panic has deafened her world. She hears only the thunder in her chest and the low, mournful nicker leaking from the glass. Another beam crashes, sending both scrambling sideways. Clarissa plants herself again, jaw trembling, yet stubborn body trembling like a bowstring drawn too long. The firefighter begins to plead, voice cracking on her name, rendered powerless. Flames dance in his visor, but she stares beyond, fixed on a promise incarnate. Time dilates. Every droplet from the hose seems to float like molten glass before hissing into steam. A nail hurtles past her cheek, glowing red, leaving a comet tail of light that vanishes long before it lands. The horses outside double in volume, forming a single seismic vibration beneath her feet. Yet within this pocket of suspended reality, Clarissa hears an unexpected sound, the rhythmic thump of a heartbeat, deep, steady, echoing from the mirror. It synchronizes with her own, until she cannot tell which pulse belongs to which soul. The conflagration around them becomes a backdrop, a tattered theater curtain, framing the communion of rider and steed, unbound by physics. Their rhythm feels destined to outlive the blaze. A sudden flashover at the barn entrance sends a shockwave barreling down the corridor, pushing Clarissa forward. She staggers, but instead of collapsing, she plants her palm inches from the mirror. At that instant, a diagonal bolt of light ignites across the glass, slicing from upper left to lower right, searing brighter than a welder's arc. The fire seems to obey the line, retreating from the rest of the surface while emphasizing the raw, crimson wound. The horse's image crystallizes, divided by the glowing scar. Clarissa recognizes it as a path, no door handle, no hinges, just direction. Smoke eddies around her ankles like uncertain fog, unsure whether to follow or flee. Above, embers swirl into arrowheads, pointing inward toward the streak. The horse backs away, melting into shadowed currents beneath a lake of molten color. One ear, one eye, one flick of tail vanish in sequence like candle flames snuffed by invisible fingers, leaving only the diagonal blaze. Clarissa inhales a ragged cord of smoke in despair, then steps forward as if to plunge through the glass. The firefighter grabs her waist, hauling her backward with desperate strength. The child screams anger, not fear, kicking muddy water that steams against his trousers. Her fingertips rake the empty air where reflection once lingered. The blaze across the mirror cools from white to copper, but does not disappear. It hangs there, glowing like a highway under construction. The rescuer pivots, tucking Clarissa beneath a fire blanket just as the roof gives up the fight. Timbers crash in domino bursts, releasing a storm of sparks that claw at their retreat. Outside, medics rush forward, pressing oxygen toward her mouth, but she tears the mask away, eyes locked on the smoldering doorway. Smoke parts for a moment, revealing the mirror still upright, amid ruin untouched in violet. The diagonal scar pulses like a cooling brand on fresh cattle, declaring ownership over everything that has transpired. Ash begins to fall like gray snow, blanketing Siren's shoulders and shattered tack until the fire seems muted beneath the drift. The scene feels less like survival, more like intermission between chapters of the story. Clarissa's legs finally fold, and she sinks beside a dented water trough. She hugs the helmet to her chest so fiercely, the plastic shell creaks. Ambulance lights strobe across her face, washing her in alternating tides of red and blue. Yet her gaze never leaves the corridor's fiery mouth. Paramedics exchange looks, trauma shock possible burns, but she refuses their questions, holding silence, a fragile foal. Inside, she catalogs every detail, the shimmer, the scar, the bow of a phantom horse refusing to abandon her. In that inventory, she finds purpose, the ride is not canceled, only postponed. She will meet that blaze and will not hesitate. She solemnly whispers the date of her 11th birthday, sealing it as a covenant. Above the barn, smoke funnels into the emerging dawn, painting lavender streaks across the night. The scent shifts from burning pine to wet charcoal as firefighters corral the blaze. Clarissa, wrapped in a blanket, stands on the tailgate of an ambulance, small and unsteady, yet resolute. She watches crews douse rafters, but her attention keeps drifting back to the mirror's metallic gleam visible through the skeletal doorway. Occasionally, a flare ignites, casting a fleeting reflection that illuminates the diagonal scar in vivid red, then vanishes. Each pulse feels like the heartbeat she shared earlier, still true. She closes her eyes, memorizing the rhythm so she can summon it whenever nightmares attempt to rewrite this moment into something ordinary. Quietly, ash still hangs over a desert mirage like a funeral shroud, refusing to drift out of the valley's cupped hands. 1 week has passed, yet the scene looks trapped inside the instant the flames surrendered. Rafters claw at the blue like skeletal fingers, stalls gape like broken teeth, and the air tastes of copper and smoke. The desert sun creeps higher, but its light merely polishes debris, tugging metallic glints from nails fused into charcoal joists. The smell is layered scorched leather, wet plywood, the faint sweetness of singed alfalfa. Silence should prevail, but the stable crackles with tiny pops as cinders cool, making the place feel half alive, half condemned. Clarissa Vance slips through a gap in the caution tape, her sneakers crunching glass pebbles that were once stable windows. She wears her father's flannel sleeves rolled and pinned, so the cuffs don't swallow her hands. The shirt hangs like borrowed armor, carrying whispers of peppermint gum and saddle soap that even wash water and burial couldn't erase. Nobody notices her trespass. Adults are busy cataloging damage, arguing with insurance men, measuring warped beams. She has waited all morning for a moment alone, drawn by a gravity she can't explain, something stronger than sorrow, stronger than fear. The corridor yawns before her, emptied of life, but haunted by the shapes it used to hold. She walks between stalls stripped clean, eyeing scorch marks that frame where brass nameplates once gleamed. Hoof prints preserved in melted rubber remind her of mares that bolted into darkness and geldings that never got out. At the far end, she sees it, the training mirror, 15 feet of glass, still intact, framed by aluminum, scorched amber, but startlingly unwarped. It stands like an untouched oath in a book everyone else has abandoned. As she nears, she senses the mirror shedding faint heat waves, so subtle they blur the doorway behind her in a quivering mirage. The center gleams a bright white glare that erases her reflection. She lifts a trembling hand. When skin meets glass, a sizzle replies, not loud but unmistakable, as if the mirror is breathing through her fingertips. She means to pull away, yet something convinces her to stay a pulse beneath the surface, slow and resonant, syncing with her heartbeat until she cannot tell which rhythm is hers. The brightness dwindles, replaced by swirling shadow. Her outline dissolves, sucked into a storm cloud, turning within the pane. Sparks drift inside that darkness, orange cinders drifting together until they sketch the contour of a horse's muzzle. Clarissa stiffens. From nose to withers, the creature assembles first bone, then flesh, then the bleached gold of a palomino. But the left side of its face is a ruin-hide scarred black eye socket, empty mane smoldering red. It stands motionless, watching her through distance, measured not in feet, but in fate. Clarissa's chest tightens. She reaches farther, palm-flat voice sanded raw. Phoenix, the horse's ear flicks. In the mirror world, glowing cinders lift off its hide like slow snow. Heat radiates from the wound, as real as a campfire. She swallows, throat splintered. Dad? Nothing in the barn moves yet. The horse lowers its head, acknowledging a name humans can't pronounce without breaking. Behind Phoenix, a new shape slides into view. Broad shoulders beneath a denim jacket, the brim of a cap tilted back. Grant Vance settles into focus, seated upon the horse with the ease of remembered mornings. He raises 2 gloved fingers in greeting, the gesture so ordinary it cracks her heart. Clarissa presses both hands to the glass, starving to hear his voice. But the mirror offers only images. His mouth forms, words silent and slow. A sentence trapped behind a barrier of charred time. She reads his lips. Soon ride dawn. The syllables spark behind her ribs. Tears rise, but the glass is too hot. Droplets vanish before sliding off her chin. Grant's face bends with sorrow, yet he tips his hat, signaling a promise kept even from beyond. A surge of longing seizes her. She wants to vault through to feel Phoenix's muscles under her knees. Instead, she whispers the vow he once sealed with a Pinky Shake Lake trail when I'm 7. The pain flashes white. Frost feathers crawl outward from her hands, painting silvery lace over blistered aluminum. The barn is sweltering, yet the mirror berths cold, balancing unseen equations. Phoenix and Grant fade, replaced by a wide diagonal brand of red glowing across the ice, an identical angle to the blaze that split the image the night of the fire. The line pulses like a metronome, marking the tempo of some journey not yet complete. Sudden weakness buckles her knees. She backs away, gasping. The frost melts water running down to hiss upon the cinders. The mirror returns to neutral, reflecting only a soot-streaked girl and a skeleton of timber behind her. Clarissa wipes her eyes, leaving comet trails across her cheeks. She kneels and scoops a handful of white ash, letting it sift through her fingers like hourglass sand. When she looks back up, the diagonal ember still glows faintly, a whisper that refuses extinction. She speaks to it, voice steadier now, I'm not afraid. The ember brightens. She smiles through tears, understanding the rule courage is currency here. She unwraps the helmet strap still looped around her wrist, sets the scuffed shell at the foot of the mirror like an offering, and presses her palm once more to the warm glass. No image appears, but the pulse beneath meets her lifeline, beating twin tattoos into her skin. Inside the corridor, heat reverberates between warped steel ribs, warping every sound into a bass that buzzes behind her sternum. Distant shouts from inspectors and a crow's caw melt into muffled gurgles. Unreal. One tone slices clean the rhythmic click of cooling girder joints, a metronome counting down to something vast. Each tick lures her forward, breadcrumbing a path only she can read through smoke and memory. The week leading up to this moment moved in strange weather each day, carrying its own micro-season. Breakfast felt arctic, everyone bundled in sweaters because talk was so cold. Noon brought monsoon humidity. Neighbors delivered condolences that clung like damp towels sliding off without relief. Nights were a different storm, dry lightning cracking behind her ribs whenever she closed her eyes. She kept hearing horses scream mere seconds before waking. Each broken sleep ended at the window, watching the barn's silhouette glow bluish under the moon, daring her to return. She noticed subtle changes around town, too. The feed store posted a banner, "Rebuild Desert Mirage donations, welcome." A coffee truck near the fairgrounds offered free cocoa to volunteers, but the barista's hands shook each time someone muttered ghosts. Kids at school argued whether the mirror was haunted or radioactive or just a myth. Clarissa said nothing. Truth felt too delicate to unload on people who hadn't touched that glass. She kept her knowledge folded tight, like a letter she couldn't yet open. Crossing the yard today, she recalled each rumor like stepping stones. One claimed if you stood before the mirror at midnight, you'd see every mistake you'd ever made. Another promised the opposite, a revelation of who you could become if courage outweighed fear. Clarissa dismissed both. Miracles never bargain in absolutes. She knows because she has lived the hardest version of a coin toss heads mornings laughing with her father, tails an empty seat at breakfast. Reaching up, she wipes grime off a surviving stall plaque. The name still reads, Mojave Mist. The mare that panicked kicked the breaker box and sparked the first flames. Clarissa's fingers linger neither forgiving nor accusing. Horses don't plot, she reminds herself. They just react like mirrors. The thought circles back to the glass, waiting ahead, and she wonders whether Phoenix's burns were reactions to some cosmic reflex to her father's pain. The idea terrifies her scars as echoes of love. She steps beside a collapsed hayloft ladder and finds a horseshoe half buried in ash. It is warped into an almost perfect heart, edges curled by heat. She pockets it instinctively, metal still warm, imprinting a crescent on her thigh. A keepsake, maybe, or a key. She does not yet know every relic she gathers. Shoe helmet diagonal ember will one day fit like cogs in a lock opening a gate no locksmith could design. For now, she accepts the mystery the way a thirsty traveler accepts canteens without question. Outside, a pickup door slams. Workers have finished surveying. Clarissa steals one last look. The diagonal line dims, yet she senses patience rather than goodbye. She whispers, "Wait for me," then retreats down the aisle, feet light heart, weighted with possibility. Ash rises in tiny eddies, parting before her like respectful courtiers. She doesn't look back. She knows the mirror sees her even turned away. A vow lives there, forged in heat and frost, and vows she has learned do not burn. At the threshold she pauses. Sunlight streaks through the absent roof, catching airborne ash, turning ruin into cathedral. She inhales the mingled aromas of char and sagebrush and feels for the first time since the funeral a hint of sweetness beneath the smoke. She closes her eyes and imagines dawn on her birthday. Phoenix whole, Grant steady the lake still as polished stone. The vision steals her spine. She nods once to no one and to everything, then slips back into the world of clipboards and caution cones, carrying a horseshoe in her pocket and a diagonal ember glowing behind her eyes. The desert dawn that greets Clarissa 1 week after the fire carries an eerie hush as though sunrise itself is tiptoeing around the wounds of desert mirage. Pale light creeps across blackened beams, revealing flakes of ash that dance like slow snowflakes before settling into every crack. Sirens no longer scream, yet silence feels temporary, a breath held by the land while it decides what to remember. Clarissa slips under sagging caution tape, her sneakers leaving shallow impressions in soot-slick soil, and cradles a battered shoebox against her ribs. Inside rattle salvaged fragments of her father's life, bits of tack, singed Polaroids, the smell of saddle soap still lingering on a cracked curry comb. Every step feels like walking across the cooled back of some prehistoric beast stable earth, but scorched into scales. She passes the skeletal paddock fence, crosses the scorched yard, and enters the corridor that once resonated with horses nickering for breakfast. Now the aisle echoes only her breath. Sunbeams perforate the broken roof, projecting columns of gold dust that illuminate floating debris. Charcoal odors mingle with wet plywood. Last night's brief rain could not rinse grief away. Clarissa's eyes flick to the training mirror. At the far end, its span of untouched glass sits dormant, no heat, no shimmer, reflecting only an expanse of ruin. She turns away quickly, afraid that even a passing glance might conjure something she is not yet ready to face. At the aisle's terminus stands a fire-scarred filing cabinet. Top drawers gape, paper tongues curling outward, edges crisped into lace. Clarissa kneels, coughing as ash puffs around her knees. Inside, she finds certificates fused together, newspaper clippings about state rodeos, a tarnished belt buckle that once crowned a trophy. She places each fragment carefully into the shoebox. Then her fingertips graze something stubborn, yet pliant, a photo album warped but intact, its once glossy cover now blistered like desert mud. She feels an electric jolt of recognition, her father's handwriting scrawled in silver marker, "Summer Rides 2017. That year still smells of cotton candy and hot leather in her head. Sticky pages release in reluctant sighs. First appear snapshots of camp kids balancing on shaggy ponies. Then images of her father grilling corn beside the hay barn. Laughter caught mid-spark. Clarissa smiles, then flinches at a half-burned photo of herself, aged 7 legs, dangling from a saddle while Grant steadied the reins. She turns the page and stops breathing. Center frame. Grant astride Phoenix, the palomino, whose burned reflection haunted the mirror. Sunlight in the image catches Phoenix's coat like molten gold, but on the horse's left cheek runs a diagonal scar, a healed brand of pain, precisely matching the fiery wound she witnessed through glass. Shock squeezes her ribs. Memories unspool the morning Phoenix gashed his face on a broken lamp bracket. Grant's gentle hands pressing gauze, the weeks of salve and patience. How had she forgotten that gory summer? Maybe grief builds dams to keep the mind from drowning. Now the dam breaks, and water rushes in, carrying color, sound. The hospital smell of antiseptic in her father's truck. The photo vibrates in her grip. Tears spill, smearing soot on her cheeks. She folds over, clutching the album to her chest, lungs aching from sobs that taste of ashes and nostalgia. The aisle seems to breathe with her sobs. Shadows pulse on blackened walls, as if the barn itself is exhaling sorrow it held in its lungs all week. Water left by firefighters drips from warped gutters, each droplet exploding in dust like miniature comets. Clarissa's gaze blurs. Through tear prisms, she sees the space around her, split into 2 realities, one where the stalls wait bright with fresh straw, another where everything is skeletal and wrong. She presses the album harder, hunting stability in its scorched cardboard spine. Somewhere beneath roaring silence, she thinks she hears Phoenix's low wicker carried on air that should be empty. Footsteps crunch through debris. Clarissa wipes her face with her sleeve and looks up. Hank Whitmore, the stable's weary owner, approaches beside an insurance adjuster, and Mrs. Reeves from the 4-H club clipboard balanced like a shield. They halt at the sight of her soot-covered knees on concrete. Hank's voice is gentler than before, but still strained. "Kiddo, this section is dangerous. Let's get you outside." Clarissa holds the open page toward them, finger on the scar. "You have to see this. Phoenix was real, his face was burned. Dad wrote him. That's what the mirror showed me." The adjuster arches a brow, taps notes into his tablet without bothering to look. Mrs. Reeves crouches, tone syrupy, yet thin. "Sweetheart, I know how grief can make pictures move. Mirrors, especially warped by heat, can fool the eye. Clarissa's throat tightens. I felt the horse breathe, she says, voice trembling but fierce. The glass was hot, like his skin. Hank sighs, rubbing ash from his forehead. Hallucinations happen after trauma. We'll get you counseling. He reaches for the album. Clarissa jerks it back, the gesture, a cub guarding precious bone. Silence stretches brittle. A new voice, calm and low, interrupts. Let her speak. Sage Redcrow steps from behind a charred post, navy scrub streaked with soot, stethoscope glinting. She has Paiute eyes, dark, steady as obsidian cliffs. Everyone turns. Hank mutters, "Sage, please." But she raises one hand, and the barn seems to hush. She kneels beside Clarissa, examines the photograph under a small flashlight that throws a halo across Phoenix's scar. Her fingertips trace the burn with reverence, as though reading scripture in a language only scars know. Scars remember what skin forgets, Sage murmurs. She looks at Clarissa, not through her. Tell me exactly what you saw in the mirror. Clarissa describes the blazing reflection, the breath fogging the glass, her father mouthing words, "Soon ride dawn." She expects disbelief, but Sage only nods, absorbing each detail like a medic noting pulse rhythm. When the girl finishes, Sage closes the album, hands it back. "I believe senses before I believe charts," she says. "The mirror showed you what needed showing, no more, no less." Mrs. Reeves clears her throat, uncomfortable. "We can't encourage fantasy." Sage's gaze slides to the clipboard, steady enough to rattle ink. "Fantasy built every faith on this continent," she replies. "And every science, too, before someone measured it." The adjuster scoffs, but Hank hesitates, eyes flicking between Sage and the mirror at the corridor's mouth, as though remembering his own whispered nightmares. Eventually he huffs and retreats with the others, muttering about hazard reports. Their footsteps grow faint, swallowed by ash-soft dust. Sage rises, offering a hand scarred by old rope burns. Clarissa takes it, surprised at the strength that flows up her arm. Together they stand midst ash and memory. The world is loud with people who haven't seen, Sage says. Your job is not to silence what you witnessed, just to make them comfortable. Clarissa hugs the album, feeling its edges bite into her ribs like a spur urging her forward. Will you help me, she asks. The question is small, but hope vibrates inside every syllable. Sage's smile is tight-forged in years of pushing against dismissive systems. Meet me after dusk at the medicine shed. Bring anything that feels alive, even after burning. Clarissa nods, not fully understanding, but trusting the map folded inside Sage's words. The vet turns away, heading toward the paddock where displaced horses wait for examinations. She moves with the certainty of someone who listens to more than heartbeat stethoscope rhythms. She hears the space between them. Clarissa watches her go, shoulders strangely lighter, though the barn remains a tomb. She gathers the shoebox, now weightier with artifacts, and tucks the album on top. Before leaving, she glances down the central aisle. The mirror sits distant, dull. Yet as her eyes lock onto its surface, a faint ember awakens at the exact diagonal where Phoenix's scar would lie. It pulses once, then dims like a wink across impossible distance. The message is clear: keep moving. Outside wind rolls across open desert, carrying the faint scent of creosote and rain. Volunteers hammer new fence posts, but their voices hush when Clarissa passes, cradling her cargo. She no longer shrinks from their sideways glances. The album in her arms feels less like proof and more like communion, a bridge plank in a crossing not yet built. She heads toward the truck where her aunt waits, dust devils swirling around her boots, each spin whispering that belief has weight. Before climbing in, she opens the shoebox one last time, slips the warped photo into a corner where it lies atop nails and belt buckle, a monarch among humble subjects. The Palomino's burned cheek stares upward, reflecting sunlight off glossy char. Clarissa whispers, soon echoing her father's silent promise. The wind snatches the word, hurls it toward the ruined barn, where it ricochets through beams, rattling tin, settling perhaps against cool glass. Hope, she realizes, is a kind of ember, small, red, stubborn, and it can wait inside ash until someone breathes. Clarissa closes the lid, senses the ember inside herself mirror the one inside the barn. 2 points of light on opposite shores of a night yet to come. She climbs into the truck, gripping the box like reins. The road home stretches west, but she looks east, back toward the stable, certain Phoenix and Grant are watching from behind glass, holding dawn for when she's ready to ride. As the truck rumbles to life, Clarissa imagines the shoebox as a lantern. Inside, every salvaged token glows, the belt buckle like a brass moon, the burned photo like stained glass, the nails, a constellation's spelling rotes only dreamers read. She tells herself that when she meets Sage tonight, they will pour these pieces onto the dirt, and the pattern will guide them. Perhaps stories are just constellations laid upon memory, waiting for someone stubborn enough to trace the lines. She clings to that belief the entire drive home. Hank Whitmore arrives at the break of a brittle desert morning wearing a necktie too tight for oxygen and a face pinched by the arithmetic of impending bankruptcy. The rumors have spread faster than the flames. Ever did a haunted mirror, a ghost horse, a grieving girl who talks to reflections. Calls from wary parents have already canceled 2 weeks of riding lessons, and last night, the city council left him a voicemail hinting at public safety optics. Hank may love his stable, but he loves solvency. More so, today's agenda is brutally simple. Remove the mirror, erase the myth, and get back to business before tourist season wilts in the heat. A rented flatbed idles in front of the barn, exhaust coughing white against the charcoal skeleton of the building. 3 workers in neon vests unload pry bars, ratchet straps, and a winch that squeals like a distressed hawk. Hank paces beside them, rehearsing warnings about liability and combustible hysteria. The crew leader, a tattooed woman named Brenner, nods through his monologue, but keeps her eyes on the yawning doorway, as if the barn might blink. Clarissa sees the exchange from behind the half-collapsed hay shed. She recognizes the clipboard. Her aunt filled out similar forms after the fire paperwork that made death look like columns of numbers. Clarissa's stomach tightens. She slips through a gap in the fence and jogs toward the barn boots, kicking up little avalanches of ash that glitter like ground quartz. She carries nothing this time but herself and the weight of the photograph tucked under her shirt, evidence she hopes that miracles and memories sometimes share the same address. Inside, cold morning light slants through the missing roof, striping the aisle in alternating lanes of gold and charcoal. The air is sharp with the scent of wet gypsum, where firefighters' water mixed with plaster dust. At the far end, the mirror looms, edges dulled by soot, yet surface pristine as though God polished it overnight. Its silent authority has only grown. Horses no longer live here, yet the aisle still feels populated by unseen muscle and breath. The crew advances with cautious certainty, rubber boots crunching over cinders. They unspool heavy straps that slap against their thighs like serpents. "It weighs a good 600 pounds, Brenner says, voice echoing. We brace tip and carry. She positions 2 workers at the base and 1 at the top corner. Hank hovers, hugging himself. Every few seconds he glances toward the doorway as if expecting reporters or exorcists. Clarissa keeps to the shadows, heart galloping. The photograph burns against her chest like a second heartbeat. She wants to shout a legal injunction of childhood magic, stop. Wait, you don't understand, but words have betrayed her lately, evaporating the moment they meet adult ears. Instead, she moves closer, 1 silent step at a time, until she is 10 feet from the mirror's flank. Without warning, the glass flickers. Not a refraction of sunlight, but an inward convulsion, silver liquid rippling from center to edges. The reflection first shows wreckage, then rearranges into the image of a desert plain at dusk. Purple clouds ride a copper sky. In the middle stands Phoenix, flank aglow, the burned side of his face, carved in ember lines, eye socket an abyss that somehow glimmers. He lowers his head mane, lifting an invisible wind, and steps forward as though depth is optional. Clarissa inhales, tears pricking. Her pulse pushes blood so loudly, she almost misses Brenner's next command. On my count, 1, 2. The workers bend knees, preparing to pry the frame loose from bolts that survive the fire. Hank clears his throat, a nervous metronome. Phoenix stops at the threshold of glass nostrils flaring. He looks directly at Clarissa. She feels the recognition like a warm cloth on fevered skin. His unblemished eye is honey brown, same as the horse she remembers feeding carrots behind the paddock fence. He dips his head, the equine equivalent of a bow, a gesture that collapses the distance between myth and morning. Clarissa raises her trembling hand, fingertips barely brushing the air. Heat radiates from the mirror, licking her skin like sunlight through magnified glass. The photograph beneath her shirt seems to hum. For a breathless instant, she is sure the glass will soften, will let her slip through to the other side, where promises still hold weight. But Brenner snaps, 3 wrenches grind. Bolts pop with metallic yelps. The frame jerks. The rippling vision fractures. Phoenix blurs, breaking into ribbons of gold and coal. Clarissa gasps. The workers strain, leaning their shoulders against a plywood brace. That's it, keep pressure, Brenner barks. 1 laborer wedges a crowbar under the frame's foot. The mirror tilts a fraction of an inch, and the aisle groans, as though 50 unseen horses shift at once. Phoenix reassembles for a desperate second, head thrown high. His burned eye smolders like a forge, just stoked. Clarissa whispers, "I see you," but the words exit her throat as steam lost in the commotion. Hank turns at the sound, eyes narrowing. "Kid, you shouldn't be here." He gestures wildly for her aunt, who must still be outside parking the car. Clarissa backs away, but doesn't run. She presses her palm over her ribs as if to cage a sparrow. The photograph's edges cut into her skin. Pain helps her stay present. The mirror tilts farther. A low, resonant hum vibrates the aluminum frame, rising in pitch like wind through canyon rifts. Dust swirls into miniature cyclones around the worker's boots. One glances at the other, spooked, but duty anchors him. Then, unmistakable, a hoofbeat, single and sonorous, reverberates from inside the glass. It echoes along the aisle, bouncing off charred beams long since hollowed. The workers freeze. "What the hell was that?" mutters the youngest, sweat streaking ash across his jaw. Hank forces a laugh. "Just acoustics. Keep moving." Clarissa knows better. She watches Phoenix plant a four-leg, invisible surface rippling under the weight. He presses forward, shoulder penetrating the barrier like a spoon through cream. Heat blasts the aisle, wilting cobwebs in an instant. Brenner curses. Static electricity arcs from the frame to her glove, snapping loud as a firecracker. She yanks her hand back. The laborer at the top loses balance, clings to a strap, and for a moment the entire mirror teeters between dimensions. Clarissa steps closer. She can smell singed hair, hear Phoenix's labored snort. His chest emerges, halfway, muscles sculpted by firelight, but an unseen force tethers him, stretching surface tension into glowing filaments. They strain like harp strings tuned too tight, humming a chord nobody wrote. Hank shouts, "Drop it, back away!" Panic fractures discipline. The workers release simultaneously. The mirror slams upright against the wall with a seismic shudder. Filaments snap back, yanking Phoenix into the glass. He vanishes in a spray of sparks that ricochet across the aisle like meteor shards. Silence detonates louder than noise. Smoke curls from the frame's edges. Clarissa's knees soften, but she remains standing. Her hands quake, nails biting her palms. No one speaks until the youngest laborer whispers, "Boss, I think we should leave that thing alone." Hank's voice emerges, strangled. "We finished the job. Take 5, shake it off." He stalks toward the yard, muttering about lawyers. The crew follows uneasy. Their boots leave restless prints in the ash. Clarissa is alone with the mirror now. Its surface has returned to ordinary reflection, but a faint diagonal ember glows where Phoenix last stood. She walks forward, stopping inches away. Her own face appears, soot-smudged, eyes wide. But overlaying her cheeks is the subtle outline of a blaze, as if fire has chosen her as parchment. She lifts the photograph, holds it beside the glass. The scar lines align. Proof yet still unbelievable unless you choose belief. She whispers a vow, "I won't let them erase you." The ember brightens acknowledgement without sound. She folds the photograph, slips it back beneath her shirt, and backs away before adults return with new strategies. Each step feels like retreat from a cliff after seeing the ocean spread infinite below. Terror, yes, but also longing. Outside, the sun has climbed higher, bleaching the sky to hard turquoise. Clarissa shields her eyes and sees Uncle Jim's truck pulling in, ant-riding shotgun, oblivious to the miracle minutes they missed. Hank argues with Brenner near the flatbed, gesturing at invoices. Clarissa hugs herself, trying to trap the residual warmth of Phoenix's presence. She feels a tug, a whisper through bones rather than ears, urging her to act quickly. Darting behind a row of toppled feed bins, she circles back into the barn, finds a paint marker dangling from a charred clipboard, and scribbles on the plywood brace holding the mirror. "Remove only when heart heals." Her handwriting is shaky but legible. She caps the pen with a decisive click that echoes like a tiny gavel. Footsteps approach. She slips out the opposite door, emerging near the turnout pens, where survivors graze. Sage stands there, gloved hands checking a mare's fetlock. She lifts her head, meeting Clarissa's gaze, over 50 yards. The vet's eyes flick to the barn, then back, reading the tremor in Clarissa's posture. She gives the slightest nod, a green light for courage. Clarissa exhales. Her hands still quiver, but inside she feels new architecture, steel ribs grown around a soft heart. The photograph presses against her sternum, syncing with the new rhythm. The sun warms her shoulders, but she is certain the heat originates from within, from the ember that refuses to dim behind the glass. She turns toward her aunt, ready to pretend nothing monstrous or miraculous has happened, at least for now. She knows the mirror's fate is not sealed by hinges or bolts. It is linked to her own resolve, and she is not done growing strong. the seam that unites two worlds. She touches her throat, feels the beat of possibility, and walks onward. Workers will return with drills and dollies, but machinery cannot pry destiny from glass forged by grief and hope. Somewhere beyond eyesight, Phoenix stamps the soil of the realm, holding him waiting for dawn, waiting for a rider brave to follow the scar. Mateo Reyes begins his shift before the sun can fully bake the scorched skeleton of desert mirage. His steel-toe boots crunching through a graveyard of splintered tack and melted nailheads. He is 27, thin as baling wire, a migrant welder whose Spanish ghosts travel with him from site to site, whispering prayers for safe sparks. Today his assignment is blunt help. Finish removing the huge training mirror so the owner can pretend the fire. The rumors and the grief were all a fever dream that will evaporate in the desert eclair. If only the evidence is hauled away fast enough. The mirror looms at the far end of the aisle, 15 feet high. Its frame blistered, yet its surface eerily flawless, as though glass had decided fire was somebody else's problem. Yesterday, Mateo sliced the surrounding brackets, and each time the cutting wheel bit metal, he thought he heard a distant horse, a breathy whistle rising through the grinder's shriek. He stayed late after the crew clocked out, leaning on a shovel, trying to convince himself the sound was wind piping through roof slats. He failed and went home with the noise still cantering in his eardrums. Now dawn spills dusty rows across the broken rafters. A ratchet strap dangles like a noose from an overhead beam, waiting to cinch around the frame. Mateo steps closer, palm skimming the air 2 inches from the glass. Heat thrums there, impossible after a chill desert night, and the faint hum he noticed yesterday vibrates inside his molars, like a tuning fork pressed to bone. He breathes the smell of warm copper and singed sage, a perfume no insurance adjuster will ever catalog. The barn is empty, yet he feels observed as though a congregation of unseen eyes blinks in unison. The hum shifts, key deepens into something alive. From inside the mirror comes a clear equine whinny, not a distant echo, but a sound birthed inches from Mateo's face. The tone is pain-stained, yet dignified, a trumpet announcing both wound and will. Hair on his neck stands straight. He glances at the doorway, half expecting colleagues to burst in and laugh at the prank, but the aisle remains deserted, and the whinny lingers, rolling in low waves that stroke his ribs. With instinct hardwired by desert storms, he plants his boots, refusing to flinch. The glass clouds swirling silver into charcoal until a luminous silhouette blooms. Phoenix, the half-burned palomino, Clarissa swore was real. Flames dance along the left side of his face, flickering within the hollow where an eye should be. Yet the right eye glows caramel, steady on Mateo, communicating something wordless, gratitude or plea. The horse bows nostrils, steaming the inside of the mirror like breath on winter pains. Embers drift from his mane, hover, and pop into darkness, leaving pinpoints that hang like stubborn fireflies. A thunderless pop splits the vision. A hairline fracture erupts across the glass, starting exactly where Phoenix's blaze meets unburned hide. The fissure darts sideways with spider-quick speed. A thumbnail-sized triangle of mirror jumps free, catching dawn light, and clatters onto the concrete between Mateo's boots. The rest of the pane heals, over-smoothing back into vacant reflection as though nothing happened. Phoenix vanishes, but the whinny echoes once more, soft as a farewell whispered through cedar needles. Mateo kneels, picks up the shard. It burns against his glove like coal, yet he feels no pain, only a rhythmic throb matching his pulse. The triangle's center glows faint ember, an eye still watching. Footsteps clatter. Hank barges in, trailed by Brenner and 2 sleepy assistants dragging straps. The boss's tie is gone, replaced by coffee stains and irritation. "Let's move, people," he barks. Then he notices Mateo crouched. What now? Mateo rises slowly, fist closed around the shard. "Glass chipped," he mutters. Hank squints, sees a blush of red leaking between Mateo's knuckles like captive sunrise. "Throw it out. Last thing we need is more voodoo stories confusing donors." He laughs at his own joke. No one joins. Mateo slips the shard into the coin pocket on his jeans, a space so small most men forget it exists. The fragment's heat settles against his hip like a living ember. Hank shakes his head. "Superstition is a luxury for people who can pay rent on time," he mutters loud enough for everyone. Mateo lifts a shoulder in indifference and walks to help Brenner maneuver the dolly. Inside, though, his thoughts flare if a mirror can shed shards and heal itself. Perhaps the stories his abuela whispered, saints hiding in Tin Milagros rivers that carry messages, were blueprints, not fables. He pats the pocket, feeling the ember's rhythm slow, sinking to his pulse until the 2 heartbeats become indistinguishable. An inner vow forms without words: keep the fragment alive. Keep the secret breathing until the desert decides what miracle comes next. They brace the mirror with quilted pads, tip it onto the dolly, and ratchet straps crisscross its face like bandages on a wounded giant. Every metallic click stings Mateo's ears. The shard responds by heating, protesting the captivity of its parent body. He hands straps, tightens buckles, keeps his gaze on tasks. Brenner notes the tension braided through his shoulders, arches one eyebrow. But file budgets rarely include therapy sessions. She focuses on securing the load. Owens jokes about haunted antiques. Laughter ricochets flat against charred walls. Mateo remains mute, counting each heartbeat, each faint pulse from his pocket, as though logging coordinates for a map only faith will draw. When the glass is upright and stable, Hank exhales like a salesman who just unloaded bad stock. Good. Warehouse pickup at 2. By next weekend, tourists won't even know this thing existed. He dusts his palms blind to the constellation of fresh fractures blooming on the backside where only Mateo's position reveals them. The welder swipes sweat from his brow, steps away, and feels the shard cool, as though reassured by distance. He wonders whether a single sliver removed from its source can nurture a whole miracle or lose power like embers starved of oxygen. The answer, he suspects, depends on how stubborn his faith proves. At lunch, the crew disperses to a taco truck by the paddock gate. Mateo slips into a half-collapsed tack room, still perfumed with leather soap and linseed oil. Light stripes the floor through missing boards, laying prison bars of sun across his boots. He draws the shard. Its glow has eased to smolder color of sunset behind wildfire smoke. When he tilts it, the caramel eye of Phoenix peers back, patient as dusk. A soft hum radiates no louder than a fly's wings, yet it fills the cramped room with the sense of a lung taking slow, deliberate breaths. He presses the fragment against his sternum until warmth drills through cloth into bone. A memory surfaces: his mother lighting a veladora for migrants lost in the Sonoran night, whispering, "Un fuego pequeño aún puede guiar un corazón grande." A small flame can steer a big heart. Mateo closes his eyes, repeats the sentence, and feels the shard respond with one pulse, a compass finding true north. He kisses its edge, heat blistering his lip, a brand he accepts gladly. Then he tucks the triangle back into his pocket, breathing easier as though armor has formed beneath his ribs where fear once slept. He rejoins the crew as they reload supplies. Owens notices scorched fingertips on Mateo's glove and raises a brow. Mateo claims the grinder bit back. No further questions. Brenner stores the odd details in a mental drawer labeled later. Hank hangs up a call, announces the city council expects a press tour tomorrow to showcase safety. His voice trembles beneath forced optimism. A few forced chuckles echo brittle. Mateo swings a hammer into a new stall brace, feeling sparks jump from metal to marrow. The shard warms synchronously, as if cheering each accurate strike that rebuilds the place myths tried to burn down. The air tastes of rust and anticipation like weather before summer lightning. Toward shift's end, Clarissa stands in the doorway, hair tugged by desert wind, gaze fixed on the void where the mirror ruled. Mateo lifts 2 fingers. She mirrors the salute, solemn and precise. The gesture lasts seconds, yet plants an alliance neither can describe. Between them, the shard blazes briefly, so hot, Mateo feels it through denim, an oath cast in silence. A flatbed horn blares as the crated mirror exits the yard and the flare subsides, but the promise remains coiled like kindling, awaiting spark. Work whistles blow. The crew disperses. Mateo lingers hand over pocket, listening for the faint whinny only true believers will ever hear. That evening, after the others drift to neon motels, Mateo sits on the barn threshold, legs dangling above cracked concrete that still smells of smoke. The desert night pours indigo ink across the sky, revealing constellations bright as welding arcs. He lifts the shard, letting it catch starlight, and it answers with its own ember, a pocket star on Earth. He turns it over, half expecting cooling glass, but heat persists, gentle yet certain, like a hand on his shoulder, saying, "I am here." He whispers in Spanish, vowing to guard the fragment until Phoenix crosses fully. The ember brightens, and for a breath, he smells fresh hay instead of ash. A distant coyote howls, the sound curving around the barn as though redirected by unseen wards. He pockets the shard and walks to the bunkhouse, each step led by light no ordinary eye can see. The moon is a ragged silver coin when Clarissa slips out of her aunt's trailer and pads across the sleeping yard of desert mirage. No generator hum, no buzzing sodium lights. Hank cut power to save on bills, so the property is lit only by starlight and a single camping lantern Mateo has stationed inside the husk of the main barn. Its glow leaks through broken planks like honey through cracked comb sketching crooked stripes across the dust. She carries nothing but a canteen and the promise she made to the fragments of fire that still hover in her dreams. Inside the barn, smells of cooling metal and burned cedar sap. Half-lifted roof panels show constellations wheeling overhead as though the universe has drilled peepholes to watch what happens next. Mateo stands near stall 7, backlit head, bent over something glinting in his palm. Clarissa raises a hand in greeting. He answers with 2 fingers, the shared salute of the fledgling conspiracy. Earlier they exchanged barely a sentence, but words are not the foundation of their alliance. Evidence is. Mateo's fragment of mirror thrums like a cicada between 2 August suns. Ready, he asks. Voice a desert whisper. She nods. Her stomach feels like it did the first time her father let her hold the reins without his hand covering hers. Thrill braided tight with fear. They approach the door of stall 7, the only stall with both walls still standing. Its wooden boards are blackened, but solid enough to hold a memory. A lone bracket remains from a halter hook. Mateo wedges the shard beside it, so the triangle becomes a tiny tilted mirror at eye level. Clarissa steps back, breaths shallow, waiting for anything. Heat shimmer that haunting whinny. For a heartbeat, nothing changes. Then the shard's surface liquefies, swirling mercury gray. A fragment of a muzzle appears, then a blaze of gold, then darkness where an eye should be. Phoenix. Only a partial image, no full body, no backdrop, but enough to prove the horse's spirit is carried inside this sliver like a genie in stained glass. Phoenix tilts his head as if testing the boundaries of the shard. The reflection is the size of a playing card. The horse's visage seems compressed, yet undiminished, like infinity folded to fit a wallet. Clarissa reaches out, fingers trembling. Warmth radiates. When her fingernail touches glass, the stall lights with faint luminescence illuminating straw dust motes dancing between charred rafters. Her lungs seize with the sudden rush of scent hay sweat, and her father's aftershave, impossible but undeniable. Mateo watches jaw slack, welding goggles perched useless on his forehead. He whispers, "He knows you?" Clarissa nods, tears catching moonlight. But almost immediately the image flickers, as if weak signal. She senses reluctance, maybe even apology, in the stalled shimmer of Phoenix's remaining eye. She steps closer, heart pounding. "I'm here," she murmurs. "I'm listening." The horse's ear twitches, but then the shard dims, retreating into inertia. Cooling air rushes in, leaving the stall darker than before. Clarissa's head swims, excitement drowned by sudden dread. The appearance felt like a summons she failed to answer. Mateo steadies her elbow. "It's okay. He came. That's proof." Clarissa shakes her head. "Proof of what? That I can't cross." Guilt flares. She promised not to hesitate, yet fear lingers like smoke in her lungs. Phoenix is waiting for a rider. She is still a child, knotted by the memory of her father's crushed ribcage. They sit on a scorched feed bin. Mateo draws the shard free, wrapping it in cloth. "When I was small," he says, "I tried to ride a bull at my uncle's ranch." I froze. People laughed. My uncle said courage is sometimes letting the animal finish its breath before you climb on. Let Phoenix breathe. Clarissa smiles ruefully. What if his breath lives in fire? Footsteps echo outside, the measured tread of someone who belongs. Clarissa stiffens, but Mateo signals calm. Sage Red Crow appears, lantern in one hand, a bundle in the other. The beam gilds her features, hair pulled back, desert dust on cheekbones, like war paint. She steps inside stall 7 unhurried. "Wind carries your voices," she says. I followed it. She sets the lantern down. Gentle light grazes timbers, turning ash to ivory. Sage unwraps the bundle. Inside lies a single tail hair braid, black at root, ember red at tip. Taken from the brush of a wildfire survivor, she explains. A mare named Emberline. She stood her ground when flames came. The fire kissed her, but did not claim her. Horses remember heat differently than humans. She offers the braid to Clarissa. "Hold this and listen." Clarissa clasps the tail hair. It tingles static running across her palm. Sage closes Clarissa's fingers around it, then positions the girl beside the shard. "Don't look. Hear." Clarissa shuts her eyes. Barn sounds fade. She searches through silence until she detects soft patterns, not the regular creak of wood, but a deeper rhythm wind, funneling through broken lofts, carrying a low rumble like thunder on the far side of dreams. The rumble resolves into hooves hitting hard-pan, steady canter that rises, then slows, then waits. Sage's voice floats low and sure. Breath travels on wind. That's how the old stories move. Feel the draft. A breeze slips through the ruined roof, brushing Clarissa's cheeks with cool, sage-scented air. She inhales. The tail hair warms, pulsing. Behind closed lids, she sees Phoenix galloping beneath night sky, mane afire, sparks trailing like comets. He circles her, waiting. She opens her eyes. The shard glows brighter. Phoenix's image enlarges, spilling beyond the triangle's edges, bleeding light onto stallboards. The burnt section of his face appears less wounded now, as though cooled to charcoal gray. Mateo steps back, awed. Sage holds her ground, lips moving in words older than English. Clarissa feels the braid vibrate as if plucked by invisible fingers. She reaches for the stall gate, pushes it open with a groan of metal. Inside is only charred soil, but her mind overlays memory, the soft bed of straw where Phoenix once slept. She steps inside, hesitates. Fire that killed her father coils inside her imagination, roaring warnings. Her knees threaten to buckle. Sage breaks the spell by placing a hand between Clarissa's shoulder blades. Courage isn't ignoring ghosts. It's letting them ride beside you. Clarissa swallows. She grips the braid like reins, lifts her other hand toward the expanding aura on the doorframe. Phoenix lowers his head, ghost muzzle extending past wood as if the barrier is now mist. His breath spills in a warm gust, smelling of apple cores and fresh hay, her childhood mornings distilled into scent. She takes one step forward and stalls. Images flash her father pinned beneath collapsed beams, screaming mare paramedics shouting codes. Her breath snaps shallow. She recoils, pressing back into Sage's steady palm. Phoenix's form shimmers uncertain. Tears sting. She hisses, "I can't." Sage withdraws her hand, not in disappointment, but respect. She turns to Mateo. "Your turn." Mateo blinks, startled. "Me?" Sage nods. Every horse chooses its next step. Sometimes that step is through another soul. She hands him the braid. Mateo hesitates. Memories of bulls and laughter flicker. But the shard warms even through the cloth in his pocket. Phoenix recognizes him. He exhales, steps into the stall. Clarissa watches ashamed and relieved. Mateo faces the glowing door. He bows slightly, a vaquero's gesture. The horse inclines in return. Sage murmurs something in Paiute. The braid vibrates. Mateo lifts it like a flag of truce. Light from the shard stretches around him, drawing a ghost saddle across his shoulders. Phoenix's shape stabilizes, torso, legs, tail of embers. Clarissa gasps as his hooves touch stall floor with no sound. Yet undeniable presence, dust stirs in twin spirals where weight should be. The horse shifts sideways, aligning with Mateo's left, inviting a mount. Mateo moves, but not to climb. Instead, he extends the braid forward. Phoenix snatches it gently between charcoal lips. The ember tip ignites not consuming hair, but illuminating it like neon. Horse and rider stand in tableau, two beings bridging realms without weight. Clarissa's fear cracks envy and wonder leaking through. She steps closer until heat prickles her arms. Phoenix turns head toward her, ember eye soft. The braid's glow pulses. She feels its rhythm match her heartbeat again. Todo se mueve contigo, she recalls her father muttering when teaching her rhythms. Everything moves with you. She places a trembling hand atop Mateo's on the braid. Flame wraps their fingers gently, painless. The horse breathes air warm and humid, despite desert chill. Sudden crash, a toolbox kicks over outside the stall, startled by night wind. The spell fractures. Phoenix rears, image glitching. Emberline's braid extinguishes. Light retracts into the shard. In seconds, the stall is ordinary ruin again. Clarissa and Mateo stand, panting, hands clasped around a tail hair that now looks singed but mundane. Sage closes the gate quietly. "Enough for tonight," she says. Lessons end before hearts snap. Clarissa wipes tears, confusion chasing awe. "Why wouldn't he let me ride?" Sage lifts the lantern, face half in shadow. He did. Through fear first. Bodies follow later. She presses the braid back into Clarissa's palm. "Take it home. Sleep with wind in your ears." She turns, leaving them to starlight, and questions. Mateo pockets the shard. It feels heavier, as if hosting more of Phoenix's mass. He meets Clarissa's gaze. "Next time," he says. She nods, clutching the braid. A distant rumble rolls over the desert thunder, or hooves impossible to tell. They leave the barn together, quiet, but their footsteps mark a new trail one Phoenix now knows leads to riders who won't break, only bend until they carry flame without burning. Above them, the desert wind gathers secrets and scatters them across the mesquite. In each gritty gust, it scribes a vow, courage will ripen, and next time, the ride will begin. By mid-morning on the third Saturday after the fire, the desert's digital silence is shattered by algorithms. A teenager from Reno has uploaded a shaky 30-second reel that shows the burned barn glimmering like a secret nightclub. At the climax, a spectral horse's head blooms inside the mirror, snorting embers. Less than 12 hours later, the clip has bounced from TikTok to cable morning shows accruing clickbait captions like "Haunted Stable" and "Fire Horse of Nevada." Influencer caravans pinch zoom satellite maps, travel vlog editors circle the coordinates, and paranormal podcasts script entire episodes before breakfast. Drone hobbyists reroute vacation plans, podcasters rehearse spooky narration, and a national tabloid dispatches a photographer with a suitcase full of desert-themed wardrobe changes, certain that tragedy, spectacle, and myth will melt together into page views. By lunchtime, a queue of rental jeeps has trampled the brittle sage around the property, glittering like a chrome river visible from passing airliners. Hank meets this pilgrimage with the reflexes of a man who has hustled through droughts, rodeo crashes, and the slow death of highway diners. By the time the second drone circles the smoke-scarred roof, he has strung velvet ropes scavenged from last year's county fair, propped a splintered podium beside them, and powered up a temperamental card reader balanced on a hay bale. Admission is $20 per peak, $40 for a selfie, and $100 for what his spray-painted board christens the premium encounter. 10 private seconds with the mirror, while a staffer records footage delivered instantly to your phone. Each guest also receives a commemorative sticker that reads, "I survived the Fire Horse" logo, drawn overnight by Hank's niece on a cracked iPad. He posts a waiver beside the entrance. Loud noises and paranormal phenomena may occur, and prints it on orange paper, so tourists photograph the warning before signing. To complete the carnival, he stations speakers in the rafters, piping a stock clip-clop sound loop loud enough to rattle ash off the beams. Every charismatic disaster needs merch, so folding tables bloom with keychains shaped like tiny mirrors, each etched with a burning horse silhouette. In 40 minutes, Hank transforms grief into a midway, and the line doubles back on itself, sunscreen and curiosity brewing a smell no sagebrush can disguise. Clarissa spots the commotion from the school bus window before it even stops at the corner. Instead of dust, she sees confetti-colored umbrellas. Instead of morning silence, she hears laughter spliced with fake horse whinnies that echo down the asphalt. Her stomach flips. She dashes off the bus, dodging classmates eager for weekend freedom, and sprints the half-mile to Desert Mirage. By the time she reaches the ropes, her lungs burn worse than the smoke did that first night. Tourists jostle phones aloft like a forest of mirrors aimed at the larger one inside. A college vlogger narrates to a GoPro. "We're about to see if the ghost horse follows me home. Smash that subscribe." A father hoists a toddler onto his shoulders and promises the boy a viral moment. Clarissa tries to slip under the rope, but Hank blocks her path, broad shoulders forming an eclipse. "Family discount's still $5 kid," he says, half joking, half desperate. She glares. It isn't a sideshow. He softens for a beat. Regret maybe then turns to scan more profitable faces. Behind him, the barn door gapes open, gut shot but still breathing. The mirror sits inside, spotlit by ring lights, MacGyvered to car batteries. The glass seems duller today, as though it has been polishing itself against sorrow and found only fingerprints. The first tour group files in under Brenner's supervision, each person allotted exactly 30 seconds to strike poses. Ring lights strobe, turning charred timbers into a techno dungeon. When the count reaches 15, a pale silhouette ripples across the glass. Phoenix attempting to surface, but the constant flashes bruise the apparition back into the dark. A cheer rises anyway. People think the distortion is an Instagram filter triggered by proximity. Clarissa, stationed outside the rope, feels each cheer like a nail driven into bone. She can sense the horse's strength thinning the way a feverish body collapses after adrenaline fades. Another group enters. Someone in a cowboy hat waves a plastic torch, trying to coax flames for the camera. Phoenix flickers again, this time missing half his main outline, smeared as though sketched in charcoal and finger rubbed away. Gray flakes drift from the bottom of the frame, ashes unmistakable. Yet no one notices except Clarissa. The flakes land on the concrete and turn to ordinary dust, as if magic dies the instant it touches Prophet. She backs away, tears clinging to Lash's throat raw with a scream she won't give the crowd. During the third rotation, Clarissa ducks past a distracted volunteer and slips into the barn, ignoring tourists who mistake her for part of the experience. She plants herself between the mirror and the group arms spread. "The horse is leaving," she announces, voice shaking. The ring lights catch the shine of unshed tears, making her look like a statue sweating diamonds. A ripple passes through the crowd. Embarrassment, annoyance, excitement. Hank strides forward, waving a laminated pass. "Step aside, kid. Paying customers." Clarissa doesn't budge. "You're killing him." Hank's eyebrows pinch. It's a reflection, not a pet. Behind her, Phoenix manifests again, smaller than before. The burn scar now a hollow that lets lamplight shine clean through like a cutout. He lowers his head toward Clarissa's shoulder, but does not cross. The gesture guts her. She can feel apology radiating off the image, shame for failing to stay. Phoenix exhales a plume of ash that coats her sleeve delicate as moth powder. The tourists gasp, phones tilting for better angles. Clarissa turns palms up, begging the apparition to remain, but it backs away, edges unknitting into soot. The glass dims to plain silver, reflecting only ring lights and greed. Mateo watches all of it from the side doorway, anger coiling like barbed wire around his ribs. Since dawn, he has been tasked with ushering groups reciting a script about thermal illusions. Each repetition makes the shard in his pocket throb hotter, as if Phoenix is pawing his hip from inside the denim. Now, seeing the horse retreat into nothingness, he feels the ember go cold, a heartbeat stopping. He abandons the script, mid-sentence steps into the glare, and yanks the credit card reader's power cable. The ring lights flicker. A collective groan rises. Hank spins. "What do you think you're doing?" Mateo answers by pulling a wad of tip cash from his apron, fanning the green like wilted leaves, then letting it slip from his fingers. Bills flutter down, settling atop the gray ash, as though trying to bribe the dead. "Take it," Mateo says, voice low. "Feed your ghosts." He removes his staff lanyard, hangs it on a protruding nail, and walks toward the exit. Every step leaves prints that glow briefly, Phoenix's ember tracing his path before fading to dust. Silence swells after the cash hits the floor. The crowd shifts, morality rippling through them, like wind across tall grass. A few pick up bills, then realize the cameras are rolling and drop them again. The vlogger lowers her GoPro, uncomfortable with the lack of narrative control. A tourist couple whispers about leaving. The toddler starts to cry, sensing tension grown-ups pretend isn't there. Hank's face hardens into red clay. "Fine," he snarls at Mateo's back. "Plenty of people want your job." But his shout cannot dam the exodus. Row by row, guests file out, some muttering apologies to Clarissa, others avoiding eye contact as if the barn walls themselves judge. Without bodies to absorb sound, the place feels cavernous, the looped hoofbeats jangling tinny and pathetic until Hank yanks the speaker plug in frustration. Sudden quiet lays bare the crackle of settling timber and the faint sigh of wind funneling through broken boards. The mirror sits inert, blank as an unplugged television. A sheet of ash slides down its surface and lands in a pile shaped suspiciously like a horse's profile before crumbling into formless gray. Clarissa kneels, scooping the cool dust into her palms, letting it sift through her fingers like the last grains of an hourglass. Outside, dusk gathers, stretching indigo shadows across the parking lot, where earlier sunlight glittered off license plates for now. Mateo stands by the gate, watching vehicles peel away in clouds of disappointment. Back in the barn, Clarissa cradles that shard, its ember rekindling against her skin. It is dim, but alive. She presses it to the mirror's blank heart. For one fleeting heartbeat, a faint outline of Phoenix resurfaces, no brighter than candle smoke and bows. Then it scatters into motes too small for ordinary sight, joining the gloom. Clarissa whispers, "I won't let them use you again." She pockets the shard stands and finds Sage in the doorway, holding 2 cups of desert mint tea, steam curling like question marks. The vet says nothing, just hands over the cup and nods toward the ridgeline where night rushes in. Wind picks up stirring ash into spirals that drift out the door, slip past Mateo's boots and disappear into the gathering dark. Hank stares after the dust, stunned, realizing that the attraction he tried to cage has walked off the property as smoke and secret resolve. He is left with empty ropes, fallen bills, and a barn that hums quietly with judgment. Beyond the fence, the desert absorbs every footprint, but an ember glows in Clarissa's pocket, guiding her toward a future tour no ticket can buy. Noon slides toward its darkest intention when the latest wave of spectators squeezes through the warped doorway of the barn, their phone screens raised like torches that drip blue light across the charred aisle. Hank's velvet ropes snap under the pressure, releasing a tide of flip-flops, camera bags, and weekend bravado. Clarissa is pinned against a support beam, ribs creaking. Listening to strangers trade algorithms, one man boasts that his live feed has reached 10,000 viewers. A woman whispers hashtags into a lavalier mic. A teen in holographic sneakers shouts, "More fire!" as though ruin were a djinn awaiting verbal cue. Overhead, the roof groans like a tired lung. Flecks of soot flutter downward, dusting shoulders and selfies alike. Someone's portable speaker plays synthetic horse whinnies on loop, the sound bouncing off ribs until every heartbeat in the room adopts the false rhythm. Clarissa tries to edge forward, but the crowd's thirst solidifies, trapping her behind elbows and monetized awe. The air tastes of pennies and apocalypse. At the aisle's terminus, the mirror absorbs the commotion with a predatory calm, its surface as bright as a desert sun, held captive under glass. Ring lights reflect across it like twin eclipses. But behind the glare, something moves, thin veins of red that crawl outward from the center, seeking edges as spiders seek anchor points. Brenner, hired back for the day because crowds need bouncers, notices the hairline glow and thinks it a reflection of emergency strobes. She turns away to lecture a boy about flash photography. The veins thicken, vibrating, emitting geysers of microscopic sparks that smell of cedar and ozone. Clarissa feels the temperature spike the way oven heat slams your face when you open the door too fast. Sweat erupts along her spine. No one else seems to notice. They are busy tagging friends. A blogger steps forward, angle perfect for monetization, when the first audible crack snaps through the barn like a dry branch torturing itself in winter wind, silencing laughter mid-syllable. For good. The mirror fractures again, this time from northeast to southwest, a blistering diagonal scar that spits molten glass in glittering arcs. Shards clatter onto the concrete and evaporate into smoke before they can be stepped on. They sizzle like comets dying early. A sheet of flame jets from the wound, thin but furious, painting every stunned face orange. People stumble back, colliding, their delight shredded into primal silence. Someone drops a tripod. Another loses a sandal in the scramble. Through the fiery breach, Clarissa sees Phoenix's muzzle thrashing as though an invisible bridle drags him sideways. His nostrils flare, expelling charcoal clouds that roil against the barn's stale air and convert it to midnight. Each exhale sounds like bellows inside a blacksmith's forge, rage bent to craft destiny. His foreleg pounds the interior of the glass, sending concentric ripples across reality, like earthquakes across water. But the barrier rebounds, forcing him backward, sparks cascading from his flanks. The crowd collectively inhales, forgetting the mechanics of breath. Into lungs. Black smoke pours from the mirror's wound, dense and oily, slamming the aisle like a tidal wave of tar. It eats light. Ring lamps vanish behind curtains of soot, and the barn devolves into silhouette and coughing. People claw shirts over noses, but the soot sneaks between fabric fibers, salting tongues with bitterness. The emergency exit signs, newly installed by order of insurance, flicker uselessly, then drown. In the darkness, Phoenix becomes clearer, because his flames are the only illumination, a living torch bucking inside a prison of reflective silver. He rears hooves, meeting glass with thunderclap booms that shake rafters and rattle phone lenses. Every strike splinters another vein, yet each vein regenerates, sealing him in a cycle of almost freedom. Sparks float downward, landing on tourists' hats and melting synthetic fibers. A child screams that the horse is on fire, but adults hush him, unwilling to confront the nightmare they purchased. Clarissa pushes forward, lungs burning, senses narrowing to that frantic blaze amid the stench of ruin. She breaks through the human wall just as Phoenix's eye hole on one side, nothing but embered emptiness on the other, locks onto her. Recognition slices through the murk. Clarissa's throat releases a raw sound halfway between howl and hymdad. The single syllable ricochets off rafters, multiplying like startled bats until it becomes a choir of terror. Those nearest her recoil, assuming hysteria is contagious, and the gap grants her momentum. She sprints, ash slipping beneath Sneaker's arm, stretching toward the blazing fracture. Smoke claws her pupils, but she keeps him in sight, that impossible father silhouette astride a dying promise. Phoenix lunges again, glass warping inward like hot wax, but still it holds. Flames halo Clarissa's face. Sweat steams off her hair. She lifts a hand, intent on breaching, when a stranger's elbow clips her shoulder, spinning her sideways, knocking the cry from her lungs. She collapses to one knee, vision strobing with pain and frustration, air knives slashing alveoli. Still she gathers breath and lurches up again. Over the pandemonium, Hank's voice erupts, shrill, ordering evacuation, pleading liability. but smoke swallows his syllables before they penetrate the stampede. Beams overhead glow cherry pitch, popping like popcorn, seasoned with terror. A rain of ember-flecked splinters showers the aisle, and every impact buzzes against tin feed buckets like frantic warning bells. Clarissa rises, staggering through silhouettes that surge toward exits lit only by memory. Each time she blinks, Phoenix's outline flickers at a new angle, as though the mirror is rotating dimensions in search of a door. He rears again, forelegs disappearing beyond the glass, sparks exploding across his chest like captive supernovas. The surface now resembles cracked ice over lava fissures, glowing, ceiling glowing again, a symphony of futile regeneration. Somewhere a fire alarm that survived the inferno finally discovers purpose and begins wailing its metallic scream, weaving with Clarissa's ragged breaths into a duet of mortal urgency. Tourists shove past her eyes, streaming their souvenirs, abandoned their influencer smiles, melted into masks of pure instinctive dread tonight. Visibility plummets to inches. Smoke layers itself into living fabric, winding around faces like mourning veils made of night. Clarissa gulps shallow air through her sleeve, tasting carbonized pine and the metallic tang of adrenaline. Memories smash her consciousness, her father laughing while tightening a girth. The promise of dawn rides the thud when beams fell. Each memory flares against the darkness, like photos tossed into a fire, brief, bright, gone. She staggers forward, hand outstretched, seeking the searing heat that guides her better than sight. The mirror looms an arm's length away, yet seems on a different continent. Phoenix is barely visible now, shape disintegrating into gray motes that swirl in slow agony. Clarissa musters every shred of voice and screams "Dad" again, the word fracturing halfway through, splitting into syllables that sound ancient feral. Her call slices the smog, strikes the glass, and for one impossible heartbeat, the fragments of horse and rider coalesce, fighting to answer her. But the furnace of fate welds, shut once more. A seismic crack detonates across the mirror's face, bisecting it vertically, like a sword stroke from a cosmic executioner. The barn floor judders, as if acknowledging the rupture in its own bones. A pillar of flame shoots upward through the fracture, colliding with the rafters and exploding into a blizzard of incandescent splinters that drift down in lethal slow motion. Phoenix thrusts his head through the opening, his mane a river of fire, licking real air for the first time, heat-warping space around his muzzle. The crowd, or what remains, recoils in horrified awe. Some drop phones, others drop to knees. Clarissa lunges almost close enough to feel the blast furnace exhale from burnt lungs, but the vertical crack spasms shut, chopping the emerging head into sparks that scatter like terrified fireflies. The mirror howls, a frequency too low for reason, too high for denial. And the barn answers with cascading groans, nails screeching out of joists as reality recalibrates around the trembling girl who can only watch collapse. Smoke density crosses the threshold where light surrenders. Everything becomes a negative image, bright flames etched against absolute void. Clarissa coughs so hard her vision spotlights dots swarming. She drops to all fours, crawling over debris that scorches her palms. Every breath is a gamble, whether oxygen accompanies it. Yet she crawls driven by a compass whose needle is sorrow. Fingers bump glass, warm, spider-webbed with fractures. On the other side, Phoenix flickers like an overexposed frame. He paws at non-existence flesh, sloughing into embers that drift sideways, sucked back by some cruel vacuum. Clarissa presses her forehead to the pain, tears sizzling on contact. She whispers, "Apologies, promises, please." The horse tries to mirror her posture, lowering his shuddering head until their reflections almost align, a kiss separated by one molecule of cursed silver. A dull boom overhead warns of collapse, but neither moves. They are statues carved from mutual regret and molten hope. Somewhere alarms wail, but destiny beams more loudly inside her ringing skull this night. Axes hack through the side door, fanning fresh oxygen that fuels the inferno into a tyrant. Fire rescue silhouettes invade the corridor visors, reflecting apocalypse, but they navigate by training, not disbelief. One drags a hose whose nozzle coughs mist that hisses against superheated air. Steam clouds everything, erasing boundaries until mirror horse and humans dissolve into watercolor chaos. A rescuer spots Clarissa, arm outstretched against the cracking glass, and lunges. As gloved hands yank her back, the mirror gives one final convulsion. Spiderweb fractures radiating concentric webs, pushing Phoenix's image outward like shattered stained glass of a saint no longer welcome. The horse's torso bursts into ashen butterflies that swirl above the chaos before sublimating into nothing. Clarissa's cry. Dad, don't leave me, splits her throat raw, echoing between collapsing rafters and the vacuum the departing spirit leaves behind. Firefighters carry her toward daylight, but her gaze clings to the now lifeless mirror, whose surface in the sudden water spray looks exactly like a tombstone for all the untold promises. The ember in Clarissa's pocket feels heavier than iron, a molten heartbeat pulsing against her ribs as if Phoenix himself rides inside her skin. Night drapes the wounded barn in charcoal veils, yet a stubborn lantern left by Sage throws a single cone of amber across splintered boards and silence. The crowd and its commerce are gone. Velvet ropes lie coiled like shed snakeskins, sticker litter curls in cooling drafts, and Hank's cash box sits overturned coins, glittering among ashes like false constellations. Clarissa moves through this hush as though it were deep water, every step deliberate, her boots crunching charcoal that once was cedar. In that quiet, her father's promise seems to echo from rafter to rafter. We finish the ride at dawn, kiddo. Mateo limps behind one palm clasped to bruised ribs, yet his resolve matches hers. The triangular shard in his pocket keeps glowing, guiding him like a compass whose needle points only toward unfinished grief. Sage waits near the mirror, arms folded, eyes reflecting lamplight, but betraying no doubt. She will watch and guard nothing more. Outside, coyotes sing in distant arroyos, but no sirens wail, no tourists laugh. The night belongs to ghosts and to the living who still believe in them. The mirror's once seamless face is now a cracked sculpture of silver ice fissures, tracing constellations across its height. Clarissa stands inches away and raises a soot-streaked hand. The glass warms beneath her fingertips, softening like wax near flame. Red light spreads in rings from her touch, knitting fractures closed as if time itself backtracks. Melted silver turns translucent, sluicing downward in viscous folds until the mirror resembles a freestanding waterfall of fire. From its depths springs the scent of spring grass, impossibly fresh. Within the glowing sheet, Phoenix materializes, stepping from blackness onto a floor no one else can see. His right flank blazes gold, his left bears the charcoal scar that binds their fates, yet pain no longer distorts his stance. He lowers his head until the copper ember of his surviving eye aligns with hers. Invitation hums in that gaze, no command, only trust. Clarissa breathes once, steadying the tremor racing her limbs, then presses her other palm beside the first. Liquid heat climbs her forearms, cleansing fear the way sunrise lifts fog. The molten plane bulges outward, shaping a portal rimmed in flickering sparks. Clarissa draws a breath, scented of old hay, and sunrise bends knees and steps through. Viscous light supports her weight like tempered silk. Neither water nor glass, it obeys affection. She swings her second leg over and finds herself astride the threshold barn behind an unfathomable prairie ahead. Phoenix bows so she can grip his mane warm strands that crackle with quiet electricity, then straightens when she settles between his shoulders, seat cupped by a saddle woven from dawn itself. From Mateo's vantage outside, the scene defies mortality. Clarissa appears half-drowned in silver fire rising onto a horse that should not exist until both forms surge forward and vanish into the mirror's core. For a heartbeat, the barn inhales walls flexing inward, lantern flame guttering, and then the portal seals, leaving only ripples of cooling metal. He staggers, but does not cry out, hands clenched around the shard that suddenly cools its purpose fulfilled. Inside the passage, Clarissa and Phoenix race through a corridor woven from memory and starlight. On one side, rafters reassemble beneath restoring beams. On the other, her father lifts her onto a pony at age 5, laughter bright as cymbals. Each stride disrupts these images, scattering them into amber motes that trail behind like comet tails. The air smells of cedar and ozone. Hooves make no sound. Gravity loosens its grip. Speed belongs to desire, not muscle. They burst onto a mesa bathed in pre-dawn indigo. Above, constellations wheel faster than clocks. Below, grass shimmers silver, every blade singing in harmony with hoofbeats. Phoenix stretches into a gallop so smooth, she feels motion only in the wind threading her hair. Sparks spray from his shoes, ascending to join restless stars. Ahead, a ridge beckons, crowned by a lone ponderosa, its trunk scorched but budding green at tips. They crest just as first light spills, and the world ignites from violet to molten gold. At the summit stands Grant Vance Hole, in waiting denim jacket glowing like lit charcoal. Clarissa reins in slides from Phoenix's back and sprints into arms that smell of saddle soap and dawn. Tears flood heat from her cheeks, and his hands calloused and solid map her shoulders as if reacquainting themselves with a favorite book. You kept the trail open, he murmurs, voice deeper than thunder, yet softer than straw. She cannot answer. Language dissolves under the weight of reunion. Grant guides her back to Phoenix, and together they mount Clarissa in front, his steady arms closing around fingers, lacing reins that gleam like braided flame. Horse and riders descend the far side of the ridge into a valley flooded by mirror-still water reflecting unborn galaxies. The lake accepts their weight as though surface tension has made a pact with love. Hooves leave concentric rings that expand into constellations before fading. Midway across an island rises a perfect emerald circle holding a wooden stand. Upon that stand rests an oval of flawless glass, not reflective but luminant, showing scenes of what could be desert mirage rebuilt as sanctuary children grooming rescued mustangs, Hank distributing feed at cost, Mateo forging ceremonial shoes under an open sky. Clarissa lifts the oval. It vibrates like a small planet promising but demanding responsibility. Grant kisses her hair. "Carry Dawn home," he says. His form begins to shimmer, each particle glowing, swirling upward like campfire sparks caught by wind. Panic claws her throat, yet his eyes remain tranquil. Sunrise belongs on both sides, he assures. Phoenix kneels so she can mount solo. Grant rests one glowing hand on the stallion's neck, the other over her heart. Ride. Then he steps back, dissolving into rays that merge with the growing daylight. Clarissa bites her lip until iron floods her tongue, then nudges Phoenix forward, clutching the oval tight to her chest. They gallop toward a floating seam of silver that appears ahead thin as a sword blade. The closer they come, the wider it yawns, unfurling into a tunnel, roaring with wind that smells of barn smoke and juniper rain. Phoenix leaps. Seam swallows them in blinding brilliance. Clarissa feels every regret slough from skin like cracked husk replaced by fierce resolve. In the next blink, they erupt back into the barn aisle, hooves striking concrete without sound. Lanterns flare, ash lifts, then falls like snow shaken from dreaming trees. Sage and Mateo witness the re-entry with primal reverence. Phoenix stands unburned hide, gleaming with sunrise, colors mane flowing in ordinary air. Clarissa swings down, knees shaking, yet she does not stumble. She hands Mateo the oval, which now burns with internal dawn, but does not scorch. Around them, the scorched beams bead with moisture. Charred walls exhale steam as if cooled by spring rain. The barn, once grave, feels suddenly womb-like, ready to nurture life again. Clarissa turns to the original mirror. Its surface is dull, fully solidified. She presses her palm, no heat, no give, only the faint echo of what was. Journey complete. She rests her forehead against the cool glass and whispers, gratitude, apology, farewell. 3 breaths, 1 heartbeat. The mirror stays mute, yet the barn feels lighter, as though that silence is permission. She steps back, marveling at the way sunlight pours through ruptured roof slats and braids itself around her shoulders like a shawl of gold. Phoenix paces beside her ears, flicking tail, swishing a living constellation come to anchor in daylight. Outside dawn, over Nevada paints mesas in rose and bronze. Sage meets them at the threshold, her scrubs ash-stained, her expression both tired and joyous. She places a grounding hand on Clarissa's shoulder and speaks 5 quiet words. Wind carried you both ways. Mateo kneels beside Phoenix, tracing the stallion's healed cheek with work-scarred fingers that tremble despite years of welding steel. The oval mirror rests in his lap like a newborn star emitting a pulse he can feel in every bone. Real horses nicker from distant paddocks, their calls weaving with meadowlark songs. Above, smoke from chaos unravels into banners of gold. Clarissa inhales tasting juniper and dew and understands the scent is possibility. Hank arrives late, drawn by commotion he thought extinguished. He wades past toppled tables and stops when he sees the trio bathed in sunrise. His eyes dart from Phoenix to beads of water on scorched planks, and something inside him crumbles. Coins clink in his fist, but he lets them spill, rolling across the floor like tiny suns. He whispers an apology first to Clarissa, then to the horse, then to the better self he sold for profit. No one answers. Forgiveness floats on the warm breeze, carrying wood smoke and fresh sawdust. Hank kneels, head bowed, willing to rebuild on new terms. Morning light catches those coins, casting ripples of gold across the soot, like seeds waiting for a careful hand to nurture growth. Clarissa walks toward the open paddock gate, Phoenix matching her step for step. She feels the desert beneath her boots, freshly awakened, as if every grain of sand has caught sunrise fever. In the distance, volunteers are already arriving with lumber and water buckets, answering a summons they do not fully comprehend. She does not wave them down or issue orders. Instead, she raises the tail hair braid Sage once gave her and lets the breeze carry it skyward. The coarse strands unfurl, catching light, turning into a plume that drifts east toward towns, toward children, toward stories yet untold. Phoenix wickers low, and Clarissa swings onto his back with practiced ease. Together they trot into the brightening morning shadowless, because every darkness has finally learned to share its flame. Behind them the barn creaks, as if stretching after a long, terrible sleep, rafters shedding tiny droplets that fall like rain onto thirsty soil. Somewhere a meadowlark lands on the shattered ridgepole and begins to sing a tune bright enough to feel like prophecy. Dawn seeps across the Nevada sky like diluted fire smearing rose gold into the bruised horizon, while the barn at Desert Mirage exhales the last ghosts of smoke. Clarissa stands at the threshold where scorched earth meets unburned sand, her fingers still tingling from the impossible ride through molten glass. The lantern Sage left behind has burned out, yet in its stead an amber glow rises from the street-quiet desert itself, as if the land is remembering how to pulse with warmth instead of pain. Clarissa's breath clouds in front of her, strange for summer, but she feels no chill. Beneath her ribs an ember beats steady, sinking with hooves she cannot yet see, but somehow already trusts. She places a hand on Phoenix's glossy neck. The stallion's muscles twitch with anticipation, ears swiveling toward the distant ridge where sunrise gathers momentum, as though the dawn has been summoned to witness a promise finally kept. A low tremor ripples through the ground, subtle at first, then rhythmic, a percussion that merges heartbeat and earthbeat into one living drum. Dust lifts off sagebrush in misty halos. Over the ridge pours a silhouette so luminous it seems carved from sunrise itself. Phoenix resplendent and real, not half inside glass, not stitched by firelight. Illusions trots into view with Clarissa astride mane snapping in crimson ribbons. But the wonder does not end there. Behind him stretches a line of horses, neither branded nor haltered mustangs, with manes tangled like desert storms. A sway-backed mare marked by old lightning scars, two coal-black yearlings, still learning the cadence of freedom, and a silver roan gelding that glitters as though dipped in dew. They flow around Phoenix in a widening fan hooves, drumming a hymn older than the hills. Each stride releases sparks that extinguish mid-air as though some invisible forge is hammering sorrow into starlight. The congregation of volunteers, reporters, and weary townsfolk gathered outside the wrecked barn goes silent, phones forgotten in pockets, profit calculators short-circuited by awe. Sunlight ignites behind the herd, turning dust into liquid copper and casting long shadows that stretch like dark wings across the yard. Hank Whitmore staggers from behind a tilted feed shed drawn by thunder he cannot price. Soot streaks his cheeks, and the once crisp ledger under his arm flutters uselessly in the wind. He stops when Phoenix locks eyes with him, one gaze the color of warm whiskey, the other eye a healed hollow glowing like smothered coal. Hank's shoulders sag. For a breath he looks every year the desert has carved into his hide. Inside the barn, a final tongue of flame gutters along a fallen rafter, flickers, then dies with a sigh, leaving only rising curls of coppery steam. The sudden hush is profound. Even the wind holds its breath. Warmth still radiates from the ash-paneled floor, but it is no longer a predatory heat. Instead, it feels like the lingering embrace of a hearth after the logs have collapsed to ember. Clarissa dismounts, boots kissing cinders that do not scorch. Phoenix turns wickers softly, then steps into the yawning doorway. As his hooves cross the threshold, fractured boards seem to relax, as though recognizing a steward returned. One by one, the other horses follow, snorting curiosity into the air thick with history. Their hoofbeats echo inside the cavernous shell, steady, deliberate, almost ceremonial rhythms that rewrite the barn's memory from funeral march to prelude. Clarissa trails them, palm trailing along a beam that once seethed with fire. Now, it radiates gentle warmth, like sun-warmed cedar. The stallion pauses beside the heap of cooled ashes that had been his phantom prison moments before. He dips his muzzle, inhaling deeply, then exhales a plume of mist that spirals upward, catching stray embers that flare gold and fade into glitter. At that exhale, Sarah, an elderly volunteer kneeling with a bucket, swears the charred air smells briefly of apple cores and alfalfa. Children edge closer, mesmerized. The yearlings nuzzle pockets searching for treats, and finding none settle for human fingers that stroke their velvet noses with tentative wonder. Hank's knees buckle. Paperwork slips from his grasp and floats like wounded gulls before settling in pooled water at his feet. Tears etch rivulets down his soot-coated face. He staggers forward until the tips of his boots touch the warm ash carpet. Dropping to both knees, he scrapes trembling palms through the debris, lifting a handful that leaks between his fingers like hourglass sand. "I'm sorry," he rasps, voice gravel raw. "I thought money could stitch the hole." Ash drifts onto his shoulders like a benediction. Phoenix turns his great head eyes Hank with an expression so deep it approaches human comprehension, then lowers his muzzle until whiskers brush the man's forehead. Hank closes his eyes, and a fresh sob escapes one not of fear or failure, but of release. From the north entrance, Mateo appears, shirt torn, cheeks smeared with blood-turned rust. He had run toward distant sirens after the earlier chaos, and now returns with a paramedic jacket draped over bruised shoulders. Seeing Phoenix alive and barn whole, he halts in disbelief, then grins so wide it cracks dried blood on his lip. In 3 long strides, he is beside Hank, hooking an arm under the older man's elbow, lifting him gently. "Tiempo de sanar," he whispers. "Time to heal." Hank squeezes Mateo's wrist in silent gratitude before turning to guide a dazed tourist still coughing toward open air and bottled water. Clarissa edges deeper into the aisle where flames once ruled. Each horse finds a stall, as if guided by memory, older than this barn noses testing empty waterers that inexplicably still glisten with condensation. From the rafters droplets fall, condensed steam perhaps spattering ash into gray constellations. Phoenix stops beside stall 7 now, cleaned of char fresh straw somehow spread across the floor, though no one recalls doing it. He paused once, beckoning Clarissa. She steps in, and he bows, encouraging her onto his back. She hesitates, heart still sore from recent terror, but behind her, she hears the deliberate crunch of Mateo's boots and the softer pad of Sage's moccasins. Their presence knits courage into her spine. She mounts with fluid grace, settling onto a back warm as summer stone. The stall door swings open of its own accord, and Phoenix walks into the aisle, Clarissa aloft. Hooves ring like church bells on stone. The other horses fall in behind roan mare yearlings, even a sway-backed palomino foal that limps but keeps pace. They exit the barn single file into sunlight, now fully kindled. The yard crowds part instinctively, forming an honor guard. Someone begins to weep. Another drops to one knee. A reporter lowers her camera, forgetting to press record. Clarissa raises a hand, palm outward, a mute salute to grief transformed. Sunlight hits her eyes, and for a heartbeat, her iris gleams, with the same ember hue as Phoenix's scarred socket, a reminder that some wounds, once faced, refract light instead of swallowing it. Hank hurries forward, holding a battered water hose. First, he kneels beside a fallen volunteer, pressing a soaked rag to the man's singed wrist. Then he hands the nozzle to Clarissa. She directs the stream over Phoenix's legs, washing soot off muscular fetlocks and anointment closing the chapter of pain. Water splashes onto nearby embers, releasing steam that coils skyward in shapes reminiscent of galloping colts. Children gasp, certain they see wings. Mateo coordinates with firefighters, still milling, guiding them to check rafters, shovel debris, and reopen ventilation where smoke lingers. Each instruction lands with newfound authority, as if the ember once buried in his pocket now resides in his tongue. Sage leads a makeshift triage line, pressing aloe salve into palms, teaching breathing patterns inspired by horse rhythms to tourists trembling with delayed shock. Even the desert wind cooperates, sweeping away the acrid residue, leaving behind the crisp scent of creosote after rain. When Phoenix finishes his circuit of the yard, he returns to Clarissa's side muzzle, nudging her shoulder. She swings down both feet, hitting earth that no longer smolders. Meeting Hank's gaze, she offers the hose back. He shakes his head and pushes it toward her. "It's yours now," he murmurs. "The water, the land, the story." Clarissa bows her head, accepting stewardship, not of property, but of possibility. She turns and with a quiet cluck guides Phoenix toward the open pasture gate. The assembled herd follows hooves muffled in soft dirt. Beyond the fence, sun-struck grass ripples greener than any remembered August. Phoenix breaks into a trot, leading his caravan toward the distant line where sky meets sage. The roan bucks the mare, nickers the yearlings, kick up miniature dust cyclones of pure joy. Clarissa jogs beside them until breath runs thin, then stops at the crest of a shallow rise. She watches silhouettes shrink against the shimmering horizon until the herd appears to merge with sunlight itself. At last, Phoenix pauses, pivots, and rears a fiery statue chiseling itself against blue vault. His whinny rides the breeze back to the barn, ringing like a trumpet made of hope. Hank, Mateo, Sage, and the gathered townsfolk absorb that cry. It beats in their chests, rearranging something small but significant, a recognition that catastrophe can be both ending and invitation. Hank wipes new tears, but this time they trail through ash to reveal clean skin beneath. He turns, surveys the barn, the scattered coins, the broken ropes, and then the faces waiting for direction. "Let's make it a refuge," he says, voice soft yet unyielding, "for every creature that walked through fire." Agreement rises in murmurs that melt into determined action. The coins become seed money, literally. Sage suggests mixing them into fresh cement for symbolic foundations. Volunteers sweep ash into barrels labeled fertilizer for the future. Someone fetches shovels, another unrolls fencing wire. The reconstruction begins not from profit margins, but from the shared pulse Phoenix ignited. Clarissa stays on the hill until the herd blends with heat shimmer. Only then does she lift the tail hair braid still tucked through her belt loop and release it to the breeze. It lifts, twisting skyward, catching sunlight until it blazes like a meteor ascending instead of falling. Her heart, once a cage of cinders, flutters open. She heads back to the barn where fresh lumber is already being offloaded, where children stack rescued feeders, where Hank signs donation forms with wet eyes but steady pen. As she walks, she hears a new sound, hooves, yes, but slow grounding matched by hammers tapping nails in steady, hopeful rhythm. Each strike seems to echo an ancient refrain, "From fire we forge beginnings." By the time the sun sits high enough to bleach the desert's bones, the barn's charred beams are half wrapped in new pine planks. Horses munch alfalfa in temporary corrals set up beside water tanks, shimmering like mirages turning real. Clarissa pauses to stroke the silver roan gelding, now fitted with a fresh halter Mateo has knotted from salvaged lead ropes. The gelding lowers his head, eyes soft, and Clarissa understands she is touching a chapter not yet written. Behind her, Phoenix snorts approval, the scorched side of his face calm. No ember glow, only a healed brand that marks the distance between destruction and rebirth. And when a hush falls across the yard, some communal breath shared by all species present, Clarissa hears faint but undeniable her father's laughter rolling like distant thunderhead applause. She looks skyward, sees nothing but blinding blue, yet knows he is there, stitched into the sunlight itself. She places a palm over her heart, feels the ember's steady pulse. It is smaller now, no longer a burden, but a compass pointing forever toward horizons where ashes turn to fertile soil and hoofbeats spell out the oldest, simplest truth. Hope can gallop out of any fire if someone is brave enough to open the gate. The summer solstice arrives, like the gentle turn of a giant key unlocking the many-chambered heart of desert mirage. From first light, the rebuilt yard hums, children laugh, while filling water buckets, and volunteers paint bright numbers over new stall doors. A banner ripples above the main gate, Mirror Ride Therapeutic Horse Program, its letters sewn by neighbors who once stitched sandbags against wildfire. Clarissa stands under the banner clipboard, in hand hair tied back with a strip of the old halter Phoenix wore before the flames. The 13-year-old who once ran through cinders now moves with the sure step of someone who has mapped the distance from grief to promise and knows the route by heart. The first participants step from a donated shuttle, 5 children aged 7 through 12, each carrying grief like an oversized backpack. Some lost mothers to wildfire, some lost fathers to distant wars. One girl, tiny as a sparrow, lost both parents in a freeway pileup. They shuffle toward the arena, eyes wary, until Clarissa kneels and offers each a smooth river stone etched with the outline of a horse in mid-stride. "This is your worry stone," she explains, voice low, pace unrushed. Inside the open-sided arena stands the new mirror, a rectangle of tempered, shatterproof, burn-resistant steel, polished to starshine. On its surface, you can see the heaven-wide desert behind you, but the reflection bends a breath slower than reality, as though time respects the need for second chances. Clarissa taps the mirror once a ritual start, and a low chord hums through the frame, like distant thunder. Phoenix appears at the far gate led by Mateo, whose limp has softened into swagger. The stallion's scarred cheek wears no blaze today. Instead, a spray of ceremonial paint traces laurels around the healed flesh, gold mixed with red earth to celebrate survival. Hank himself follows rolling hay bales from the feed shed overalls, flecked with sawdust instead of ash. His eyes still redden at sudden memory, but the set of his jaw says, rebuild, not regret. The session begins with breathing. Children line up opposite the mirror. Clarissa guides them through box breaths. Inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 4, hold 4, while Phoenix mimics the rhythm barrel rising and falling like desert dunes. The steel pane responds, its surface rippling with faint amber pulses that match the collective exhalations. At pulse 5, reflections start to shimmer, where each child stands a translucent silhouette of their lost parent or guardian, materializes not photorealistic, more like light remembering love. Eyes widen, but no one screams. The silhouettes place calming hands upon reflected shoulders, lending posture and quiet to small bodies shaking with largeness of feeling. One by one, the children approach Phoenix. The horse lowers his head to every small visitor, letting them trace the contours of his scar, showing them that a wounded face can still house a patient soul. When hands tremble, Clarissa places her own over there near steadying. The mirror brightens each time contact is made, capturing the gestures and diffusing them into the silhouettes behind, so a child touching Phoenix's mane sees in the corner of vision their reflected mother brushing the same strands. Tears fall, but they land on smiling mouths. Outside the arena, Hank organizes parents into carpentry crews, teaching them how to build sensory obstacle courses, wind chimes made from spent horseshoes, balance beams, chiseled from fallen juniper. He tells them gruffly that repairing wood repairs something inside the hands. Between instructions, he wipes eyes that missed whenever Phoenix whinnies a sound that used to announce catastrophe, but now unfurls like a banner of possibility. After groundwork, Clarissa announces the ride portion. Phoenix kneels a cue he invented for children too small to reach the stirrup. Mateo fits safety helmets, adjusting straps, with the tenderness of a brother who learned caregiving from furnace and anvil. The first rider is the Sparrow small girl. She climbs awkwardly, clinging to Phoenix's mane until Clarissa secures her seat. The mirror darkens, absorbing tension, then liquefies into an almost sunset orange. On its surface, the girl sees herself not timid, but lithe, wind-braided braids streaming behind as she races across an impossible meadow. She gasps, and the silhouette of her parents runs alongside, stride for stride, until fear forgets how to hang on. The ride concludes with a collective gesture. Children line along the mirror, each presses their worry stone into the cool steel. The stones sink halfway, as if the pain is soft clay, then remain embedded, forming a constellation shaped uncannily like a wing. Clarissa explains that the stones will stay overnight, absorbing the thunder of horse hooves until tomorrow's class will peel them free and pocket inherited courage. Community is a relay, healing too. Afternoon slips toward evening. Volunteers dismantle shade canopies, but Clarissa, Hank, and Mateo linger by the mirror. They have one ritual left. Clarissa removes a cloth bundle from her satchel and unwraps the last intact shard of the original glass, a triangle no larger than a thumbnail, dull now, but etched with a scarlet streak where Phoenix first breathed his pain. Together, they press the shard into a pre-drilled recess at the mirror's center. Welders seal it with a ring of silver, merging past and present, so no child will ever forget the price of their own dawn. Sunset ignites, flooding the barnyard with molten copper. Shadows reverse. Things usually dark hoofprints, charred timber glow as if lit from within, while bright surfaces dim, humbled by spectacle. Clarissa steps back. Hank and Mateo flank her. Sage arrives fresh from tending the rehabilitation pasture and joins the line. They face the mirror without speaking. For a long breath, nothing stirs. Then, as the sun kisses horizon, Phoenix's reflection strides into the glass from some unseen meadow. He appears unscarred for the first time, coat a continuous river of gold eye sockets, twin galaxies holding more stars than sadness. On the real ground, Phoenix stands, calm, head bowed, acknowledging his mirrored twin like a brother come home. The reflected stallion turns toward Clarissa, and though mirrors cannot speak, every heart present hears a single word: enough. A hush falls over the grounds. Wind stills ribbons on the banner droop. Even the rescue horses stop chewing hay. Inside the mirror, Phoenix raises his foreleg in graceful salute, stamping once. The sound does not cross the boundary. Instead, a pulse of light ripples across the steel. The embedded worry stones flare, then dissolve, leaving behind tiny cavities shaped like stars. Phoenix's image begins to shed golden particles that drift upward, merging with the sky's burning palette. He turns toward the immense desert horizon within the pane and gallops away, body elongating into pure radiance, until only a streak of light remains. That streak folds into itself, becomes a single ember, and finally winks out, leaving the mirror reflecting only the final blush of Nevada's dusk. When the last fleck fades, the mirror clears, reflecting only the watchers, the barn, and a horizon now bleeding purple. Clarissa releases a breath she did not know she was holding. Mateo's throat works. Hank wipes his face with an oily rag, pretending it's sweat. Sage clasps Clarissa's shoulder. All journeys end inside the next beginning, she says, voice a pebble dropping into very still water. Floodlights flicker on, powered by solar panels. Hank installed the week after the renewal. Their glow is gentle amber, designed not to startle animals. The new sanctuary hums with quiet chores, a nurse refilling troughs, a teenage volunteer sketching the rescues, a local baker unloading trays of cinnamon rolls for tomorrow's orientation. Clarissa lifts her eyes to the sky, now jeweled with the first stars. Somewhere beyond, the visible phoenix runs forever. But here on Earth, his hoofprints have become directions. She turns to Hank. The waiting list for next month is 30 families. His voice cracks with effort to be practical. We'll add an evening session, maybe partner with that wilderness therapy group from Reno. Mateo grins, already planning forge nights to create additional worry stones from scrap. Sage nods approval, her silhouette merging with dusk like a promise of resilience. Clarissa smiles, feeling the ember inside her pulse, but not burn. It has learned to radiate warmth instead of warning. They walk back toward the renovated house that now serves as classroom and bunkhouse. Behind them, the mirror catches the last whisper of sun and throws it across the yard in a band of rose gold that brushes every face. Volunteers' horses, children waving goodbye for the day. The band of light lingers impossibly long, stretching into twilight. A bridge of color connecting what was lost to what has been found. Inside the classroom, chalk dust hovers where Clarissa wrote tomorrow's lesson. Shadows are proof something bright is nearby. She erases the sentence but leaves the faint outline, trusting the night janitor to notice and ponder. Before locking up, she flips a switch on the wall, illuminating a small side room where pairs of boots and tiny helmets hang from pegs, awaiting next week's riders. She touches each helmet a silent benediction, then steps outside. At the threshold, she looks back at the mirror one final time. Its surface is black now, reflecting the universe. At its center, the old shard catches starlight glimmering like a lighthouse for souls adrift. She lifts 2 fingers to her brow in farewell salute, same gesture Mateo taught her, and turns toward the dormitory lights. Crickets begin their night orchestra, and in their song she imagines the low, steady heartbeat of a horse trotting through eternity, carrying every child who needs a ride into dawn after dawn after dawn.